You know, for the longest time, I felt like something was missing from my life. Then I learned how to read and drink water, and things have been different ever since. The same is true for a lot of people's guitar playing. You can probably do some cool stuff on guitar, but putting it all together is something that a lot of intermediate lessons maybe you don't focus on. So today we're talking about just some cool stuff that may have eluded you. You may have missed this over the years, and the example that we're gonna do today is gonna sound like this. Okay, so I think this is like a really cool thing. There's one specific chord that I think everybody should know, and a lot of people don't ever talk about this chord, which we're gonna get to in a second. But the reason this sounds so good is because Sweetwater sponsored today's video along with PRS. They sent over this awesome new amp, fantastic tube amp, perfect for like an apartment situation and recording. So we're gonna hear this throughout the lesson today. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about it later, but let's get right to it. All right, so this is gonna be in the key of D. This is an intermediate lesson, so there's a couple of things you have to know first. First, you have to be familiar with an A major chord shape or an A string rooted bar chord shape, all right? So basically, you know, A major, open, 2, 2, 2, A string, D string, G string, B string. We can really just focus on the middle four strings for now. We're gonna use all of them eventually. But when you root that on the A string, you can play a D with the 5th fret on the A string, and then 7, 7, 7. D, G, and B. Okay, so there's our D major chord that we're gonna start to launch off a lot of the lesson here with. All right, the other thing you should probably know is the minor pentatonic scale. The relative minor in the key of D. And the relative minor in any key is always gonna be the 6th note. And so in D, we've got D, E, F sharp, G, A, B. B minor pentatonic is where we're gonna be taking a lot of these notes from, okay? So what that means is really just the 7th fret on the E string is your B note. The notes would be 7, 10, 7, 9, 7, 9, 7, 9, 7, 10, 7, 10, okay? So the other piece of information you're gonna need is how to do a double stop. We're gonna be teaching this too. If you've never done this before, don't worry about it. Double stops are great, but first we need 2 chords to jump back and forth in between, all right? So this is our D major chord. And then we're gonna go to the 4 chord in the key of D. What's the 4 chord? It's usually a major chord. D, E, F sharp, G. All right, so a lot of times you probably played open position, D to G, which is fine, but I wanna work on this section of the guitar today. This is gonna be where all the magic is gonna happen, all right? So, I'm gonna play a G chord like this, okay? Some of you will be like, that's not even a G major chord. What are you doing? You lied to us. Guess what? Forget about the old ways. This is gonna be the 4 chord for this lesson. I think this is the most slept on chord in any key, right? Basically, it's our D major chord. If we just take this root note out and just go 7, 7, 7, and then add the G below it, the 10th fret on the A string, we end up going 10, 7, 7, 7. So, some people will call this like a D add 4, or just even like a D over G, like maybe a slash chord or something. I'm using this as the 4 chord in this key, so we're gonna jump back and forth between this chord and this chord, all right? And this is gonna be the replacement for D to G. You can probably hear it already, right? Traditional D major chord, traditional G major chord. The bar chord D major chord, and the juicy 4 chord. All right, I'm calling this the juicy 4. Trademarked as of right now. You're welcome. Okay, so now the reason that I want to use this, other than it just being a beautiful sound, essentially we have a root note, we have like the 2nd note relative to the root, we have the 5th, and then a major 7. That's why it's not technically a G major chord, but come on, stop it. That's ridiculous. Listen, I just started learning how to read. Don't give me a hard time about this not being a major chord because the 3rd isn't in it. But this is G, whatever you want to call it. And then now jumping back and forth in between this, these positions give us a lot of cool stuff that we can do in minor pentatonic zone. All right, so now watch me go back and forth between these 2 chords, the 1 chord and the 4 chord. Again, I say 1 and 4. just means the fourth note in D, D, E, F sharp, G, the D part to the G part, we can start to embellish with stuff in this area. D, G. Okay, so you may have been able to see what was going on there. I'm establishing a D major chord. All right, so that's gonna be the first part of what I'm doing. I'm gonna hit the root note, and then I'm gonna get a little bit of the middle of the chord, and then I'm gonna snap that chord shut with this upstroke. All right, so I'm snapping the chord up, and then establishing it again, and then now we're leaving space to do all sorts of double stops, which we're gonna get to. Sounds great on this PRS amp. There are 2 channels on this, and it's got a foot switch that comes with it. You can just click it right here, reverb on and off. I'm never gonna turn the reverb off because there's no such thing as too much reverb. But then there's also a channel switch. So again, you can get like super dirty with this. I'm not gonna do the whole thing in a dirty channel just because I'm a clean guy, but the cool thing about this amp is if you put that dirt on it, it's still pretty relatively quiet relative to how much gain you can actually dial in on this. So again, super awesome amp. Sounds great at low volumes. You can crank it up to get a little more out of it, but yeah, I've been jamming on this all weekend. Very impressive. All right. So let's start double stopping between these chords. We've established that D chord. And then you can kind of see where I go to the 4 chord, that juicy 4 chord, all right? So now double stop is when you play 2 notes at the same time. The beautiful thing about the relative minor pentatonic is everything just lines up where your pointer finger can just basically hold down any 2 strings or all 6 strings if you want on the 7th fret, which again, that major chord is hidden inside the totality of the 7th fret. And then now I can start to inflect maybe 1 string at a time while hitting 2 strings with my pick. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna focus on just the A, D, and G strings, all right? Now what I'm gonna do is my pointer finger is gonna hold down what I'm thinking of as like the left side of each of these double stops, while my ring finger comes down on just 1 fret at a time. So right now I'm really hitting 7A and 7D together, and then I'm getting my ring finger down on 9A, and then now I'm going 7D and 7G, and now my ring finger is coming down on 9G, same thing with 7G, 7B. Double stopping, okay? So a good way to practice that is just okay? In fact, we could really simplify it. D, backwards. Okay, so the more you become familiar with double stopping, the easier it gets to really just rifle through those different inflections. And I think that is something that like really sounds phenomenally good. Like I promise you that like this isn't really even that difficult. It's just the concept of being able to know where you're going and then, you know, be able to manage how those double stops occur while you're playing them in between these, the 1 and the juicy 4 chord, all right? Now let's bring in a 3rd chord to maybe change the position and then do the double stops in a slightly different way. All right, so let's bring in right here a B minor chord. I'm gonna play B minor 11 because again, this is an intermediate lesson. So if you're not hip to minor 11 chords, this is the time to get it right here. There's my root note, B, middle finger, 7th fret, low E string. I'm gonna skip the A string, ring finger and pinky are gonna get 7, D, and G. And then my pointer finger is gonna grab the 5th fret on the B string. Okay, if you want to, you can omit the pointer finger and then just stop right there and get a minor 7 chord, but we're filling in the blanks here. Minor 11 is where it's at, okay? So the chord progression is going to be D, the 1 chord, to G, whatever we're calling this, the 4 chord. Then maybe D, back to 4. Then we're going to go to the 6 chord, B minor 11, to 4, and then home, okay? Now watch what I do after I go to this. You can kind of see how my hand position is going to change, where now, see right here, my pointer finger is still kind of leading the way. And then here, my pinky is kind of leading the way. And then for the minor 11 part, my middle finger is leading the way, right? So I'm kind of thinking of it coming from 3 different parts. So let's do the whole thing. Notice what I do, how I kind of change the double stops and inflections once I get to this chord, all right? I'll even exaggerate it when I get to it. D. I said I was going to go 6, 4, 1, but you know, whatever. We're just vibing. So as soon as I get there, now I'm seeing it's like, all right, well, what do I have here? What's interesting about this shape that I can use to my advantage? Well, now my ring finger and my pinky are kind of bunched together. And the cool thing about this is now I can kind of treat these double stops as maybe something I can slide around a little easier, right? So it's like, all right, well, as long as I got this, now I'm kind of doing this together with my hand instead of just doing that little hammer-on thing with my pointer finger. It's a different shape. So now I'm incorporating more sliding into the inflections, right? And I think that's just something to kind of think about. It's like, all right, what hand position do I want to go to? Well, what do I like the sound of? If I want the sound of maybe like kind of triplety, like those like hammer-ons, maybe I want to keep like an anchor pointer finger here and then hammer on stuff. If I like kind of like a slinkier double stop thing, then maybe I want to group these 2 fingers together and slide them through the shape, all right? Another thing I want to point out is how these kind of shapes connect with maybe something a little more traditional, like an arpeggio, or even just another way to play the pentatonic scale. If I'm here on this D major, one arpeggio scale thing I always think of is that right here. So I get my pointer finger, there's my root note, go from 2, slide 2 frets down, so 5, 7, 9, 1, 2, 3 in the major scale, major third to the 5th to the octave. Okay? Which again, that's just a G major add 2 arpeggio, if you want to look at it that way. You can make it a full pentatonic scale just by getting that 6 note, 5A, 7A, 9A, 70, 90, octave. And then maybe I can do something around there with the double stops. Here's a G. Now something like that, look at this, you've probably seen this if you've watched a bunch of YouTube videos. Somebody at some point has showed you the caged chord system. Not a huge caged guy myself, because like I said, I couldn't read for the longest time. I didn't know what caged meant. I had some alternative theories of what that might have meant, but then once I learned letters, it's like, oh, here's the C shape to play a G chord. It's like, all right, you can think of that as just, you know, there's your C shape, but without your major third there. And then you can kind of form that C shape here. D. hammering on that C shape. There's a million different things you can do, and it all sounds great through this PRS amp. I have this mic'd up with the Royer R10, and I am so excited. I've got like a bunch of recordings coming out soon too, so stay tuned for that. You're gonna want to see what I'm actually recording with this. But I love the sound of this. I judge and evaluate amps on how they sound clean. Again, I know a lot of people just really want that. Everybody wants to do that, you know, high gain stuff. Again, I like pedals for that too. The gain channel on this is awesome. And again, that's just with the drive cranked like maybe, I don't know, 50, 60%, something like that. You have a 3-band EQ for each side, and then you have global reverb and presence that you can kind of just like set here, and then like I said, switch back and forth with the foot switch. Again, awesome amp. Thank you so much to Sweetwater. Anything you guys ever consider getting, please use my affiliate link through that. It really helps me out immensely. Also, joining the Patreon helps me out immensely if you want to learn more about music theory and just kind of applying all this stuff. But I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Let me know if you have any questions or comments in the comment section. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot.